go ahead and just get our
Yeah,
conversation formally started.
yeah, we still have one attendee, but yeah, let's just jump in.
Yeah, and it's being recorded, so folks
Yeah,
can.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you everyone and or one for attending. Everyone watching in the future, appropriately enough, we're going to be talking a lot about like past versus present versus future on here, so it's almost appropriate. My name is, for everyone, my name is Joa McGill. I am a kind of a jack of all trades in comics. I started as a cartoonist, and now I am sometimes cartoonist, most often an editor and publisher for Power and Magic Press, also a freelance editor, freelance comic book letterer, and yeah, just general knower of at least a little bit of every part of how you make comics correctly, including printing. So yeah. There's lots of conversations I could have. Today, Gustavo and I are going to talk about our own work in the context of both of us being Latinx creators. Gustavo, tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Gustavo Vargas. I'm a Peruvian writer and artist. I mainly produce my Peruvian cyberpunk comics that use pre-Columbian cultures mixed with Peruvian cyborgs and stuff, and happens in Ganser wars and kind of very rough situations, and explore different parts of Peru. I'm based in UK, so I mainly put my comics in United Kingdom, but I also spreading my work towards USA, Europe, and even in Peru, they're getting a bit in English. But anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
my publisher just put out a comics anthology that like includes work by 50 Latinx creators from all over the place. Like they're from the US, Canada, Mexico, Bolivia, Chile, Peru, Puerto Rico. They're all over the place. And
Mañana.
yeah, mañana. And
Yes.
right now we're looking at getting that. We're looking at getting that into stores in Latin America too, which is way more complicated than I realized it would be. But I'm learning a lot. And we're like, because we were able to translate the entire anthology into Spanish as well, we're trying to send it down there in Spanish. So it's like there's no excuse. Everyone can read it.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah, you get more public. The only, I suppose, the harder thing is because I don't know that much about South America. I know actually very little about Peru industry, but there's not really an industry growing. It's kind of starting. That's why I suppose it's making it harder, other than, for example, you're in USA and it's a lot easier to find and you know who to talk with and kind of making things work.
Yeah, the only reason we're getting anywhere, like even finding like hints and like avenues to try and having like a little plan, is the fact that the collective that translated the book is based in Mexico City. So it was translated by a whole bunch of Latin American comics nerds. So they're like, okay, we actually live here. We know some things. So with our powers combined, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, very community based. That's really important, the community about this.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, has all your work been solo? Like, have you ever worked with like writers or with other artists, or are you fully like auteur, like cartoonist?
No, actually, I have different hats. So I started doing just my comics as a writer and artist, and I take control of absolutely everything, even until so I'm my writer, author, and publisher in the end, panelists and whatever. But I'm mainly more than a writer, an artist. I'm an artist that also writes
Yeah.
in that way. So I've also been working for other independent publishers. I even managed to work for the last 2 years for Creta, but it's a game based in Google Stadia, and I was the main artist for this science fiction thriller written by Dan Abnett, the writer for DC, for 2000 AD. So yeah, mainly I'm an artist when I'm working with other people, but for my work, I'm the full author. So, and to be honest, I really like it that way. So even if in some moment the Peruvian cyberpunk books that I'm doing, the stories that I'm doing, get bigger and take even more time of the time I have, I want to produce other things because there's a limit to the imagination that I will have. And it's a lot of fun touching other places and getting into, especially working with creators that interest me to create other stories. It's kind of like yourself, that you're working with different writers and you can really go to many different worlds in the same book, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I oh my goodness, someone's trying to talk to me very aggressively, but we're gonna work through this.
Technology, yeah.
The joys of doing a panel on your phone. But
Yeah.
uh but yeah, I originally started out like writing and drawing my own stuff as well. And once I got into editing other people's works and publishing, I realized, oh, uh, I'm clearly gonna like put a story of my own in my own anthology. Like, if you have the
Uh-huh.
publishing control, why wouldn't you publish yourself? but uh,
Exactly.
but the amount of work that goes into like managing the publication made me realize, oh, I don't have time to write this and draw it. Like, I'll die. Like, there's not enough hours in the day. And that's sort of how I started transitioning into writing and then hiring other artists to adapt my scripts, which was interesting. Like, apart from like, you know, I like to own my faults. I have a big ego, so I've been whittling away at my ego, over time, just being like, you
Yeah.
don't have to control everything. Another artist is drawing it; their interpretation is good too, and going from there to like, no, actually, they did do this better than I would have. So, uh,
Yeah, that's very interesting. I only have had one experience where I was the co-writer of a story for an anthology we released with the Scroll Lords, and it's the only one time that I've seen something I've written, co-written but still written, and seen pages, because it was I never had that. I write something, I draw it, so there was never that much of a surprise. But it's very interesting, and yeah, sometimes it's like, wow, I wouldn't have done it that way. Okay, you see it big, I saw it small, but it still works. But it's a bit like, for me, usually when I see a different an artist doing something, it's like you have a joke,
mhm.
and it doesn't matter how well we tell the joke. You're telling the joke, or my telling of the joke is going to be different, and that's very, very rich. That's really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it is. Yeah, my favorite is when I see another artist like take what I described, and I'm like,
Mhm.
well, that's not what I meant. That's better. That's better than what I meant. Like, like you're making me look really good right now, and I feel
Yeah,
like that's what like the best collaborations are, right? Like, you're bringing ideas to be created, and then they're like, oh, but what if it was like this, and you're like, thank God you're here.
yeah.
Like, the apart from like that kind of stuff, like more specifically to like my experience as like I'm Afro-Cuban American. Both of
Mhm.
my parents emigrated from Cuba to Miami, Florida as children. Uh, One of them would be, you know, considered blanco in Cuba, white, and
Of
my
course.
mother is what Cubans call mulata, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that was sort of an interesting thing to unpack in the context of like the U.S. and like
Yes.
how race works in the U.S., especially like black and white and all that stuff. Um, so a lot of my work is very emotional and very like metaphorical. Like there's less world building, and when there's less focus on like, oh, this is how this works, this is what this institution does, this is what the it's more about like, yeah, you get hints of like, whoa, I can tell society's organized in a different way based on how the story's going, but I'm not getting the details of that. I'm getting the details of how the main character feels about their gender while going to the sci-fi grocery store where all the items float. Like it's very like internal within like different situations that heighten the emotion
Uh-huh.
that
Uh-huh.
that's being displayed. So one of the things that happened recently working on Mañana was it was the first time I worked with another artist while writing a story that was specifically about my feelings as a Cuban about
Okay.
about something. And at first I was like, this feels weird. This feels vulnerable. This
Ah,
feels
all
like,
right.
right, because it's so personal. And then I was giving it to someone else to capture these really personal feelings that I have. And yeah, it was interesting because um my most personal, like about me comics in the past had all been drawn by me
Yeah.
myself. So it
Yeah,
was a
I
very
get it.
like, yeah, solo experience. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm curious, like how how much of like how much of like yourself is in your work. Like it doesn't have to be like how much of your feelings or whatever. Like it could be,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like
No, but
how much
what?
of like stuff you connect to about your identity is in your
eh,
work.
I mean, yes, it's for example, my approach is very different in that way because I'm more a bit more of a I plot a bit more and then start developing the character according to the plot that I need, and then I develop a bit more the personality and everything, but the plot gets starts uh, actually I world build first.
Uh-huh.
Once I have the world, I start exploring that world. And it's a bit like if you travel to some place and just sit in some square and are just watching people, and that's a lot of fun. And in some moment, oh, okay, okay, that character, no, 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 that girl looks interesting. Oh, that grandpa. And in some moment, you stay with one character and you follow them and you see how they interact with other people. I do a bit of that. So
Mhm,
it's basically I explore these characters to a plot that it starts happening as I follow them in this world that I've
mhm,
created. And little by little things get a bit more complex, but still that's it all happens in all these stories happen in Peru.
mhm,
Although I'm not in Peru anymore, but I'm staying in Peru right now, but I'm just visiting my parents. But usually I live in the UK. But it's this word is kind of my interpretation or the Peru that lives in my head in a way.
mhm,
So that's the way. It doesn't tell you that obviously that much about me, but
mhm,
but if you ask me about Peru, I will tell you certain things. But that's filtered by me. You talk to another Peruvian that is from my same area, and they
mhm,
might tell you different things. So in that way, and I try to touch things that maybe I miss or that interest me more or that I'm very curious that I don't get how I didn't get interested into that until I left. So it's a bit maybe it's something like a longing or giving value a bit more to all my ancestors, to my country and to all my culture through my comics in a way, because I left Peru in 2014, so like 8 years ago. I was living in Peru before that. So, but that's basically close to when I decided to go into comics. So that's more or less how it runs.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, especially the part about like appreciating something more, or like being more
Uh-huh.
interested once it's not like uh your ambient noise. Like when it's not like the normal, the default. um Even though
Yeah.
I wasn't born in Cuba, didn't grow up there, I've visited like twice. Miami, Florida is very unique as a US city in that the majority of the population is Cuban immigrants, and
Uh-huh.
the majority of like our mayors have been Cuban ever since. It was mostly like Cuban immigrants. Like half the school boards are Cuban. Like everything, like your doctor's Cuban. Everyone's Cuban, right?
Yeah.
You go to the grocery store, and if you ask for help in English, they look at you like
Wow.
you're trying to start a fight. Like, what is this? uh,
That's amazing.
yeah, it's very amazing. It's very unique. Like even when I describe it to other Latinx people who grew up in the United States, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Wait, what? For real? In my US city, we got in trouble if we spoke Spanish in school, or like
Oh.
we could there's only one grocery store we could go to like buy the stuff to make our food and like all this." And I'm just like, "Not Miami. Miami's not like that."
Yeah, yeah. It depends how big a community is. It really it's a very big different impact in that way. How comfortable did you grow up, and how has that kind of influence on your stories? How do you see that reflection into your stories? The growing up versus your thinking now.
It's very interesting because I feel like I didn't start feeling like, I guess, an immigrant here
Uh-huh.
until
Yeah.
I left Miami. Uh, because now I live in Portland, Oregon, which
Uh-huh.
it's one of the whitest cities in the country. I think it's
Okay.
like 75% white people or something like that. Might be higher, but yeah. So yeah, it was very interesting, sort of navigating culture shock in without leaving your country, like at all.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so much of like what I explore in my work is kind of like it's a lot of trauma often, because even though I lived in Miami, immersed in my culture and all of that stuff,
Uh-huh.
it like there's still like that's its own microcosm. Like there's Cuban forms of oppression. There's Cuban like struggles. There's Cuban like conflicts. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, 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 definitely.
Yeah, and then sort of having to like compare that the world view of everyone around me my whole life to then the world views of like that I was getting from television and the way people on TV behaved, and then the way people all around me started to behave when I left, and
Uh-huh.
just kind of figuring out even like how to use language to describe my own life and like which words like carry which meanings and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. um so yeah, yeah, the way I describe growing up Cuban in Miami to other Latinx people is like, okay, so you know how white people run around doing whatever they want and don't seem to have like any have fewer consequences, have less shame about it, just feel like entitled to like, well, this is my country, this is my whatever.
This is my area. Yeah.
Speak my language. It's like that's how Cubans behave in Miami. So like I so
Because
it's almost like so yeah, so it's like several layers of immigration. of like
Yeah.
living somewhere where you know your family's from somewhere else, but the
Mm-hmm.
place where you are now is a reconstruction, or like almost like a speculative version actually
Yeah.
of Cuba,
Yes.
because Cubans came to Miami and they're like building the society that they wish Cuba was, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that they left Cuba for not being. But then
Mm-hmm.
there are things that are better about that way of life that goes on in Miami, and then there are things that are worse about that way
Yes.
of life
Yes.
than they are in Cuba. Like just that conversation of like, well, what's better, communism or capitalism? And it's like, well, ultimately, when only a few people are in charge and take advantage of their power, both go badly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's not the use of a word, it's how it works. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's very
yeah.
interesting because it's something like an interpretation of what it is and not and know how I don't know, it changes a lot. For me it's very funny because I grew up also I lived basically most of my life in Peru and we have very uh, post-colonial structures. So the whiter European white you are, you're in a higher caste, and the more native you go, you become a second citizen, second category citizen. It's very racist, but at the
Mm,
same time very friendly in a way. So it works very strange. You can be completely people can be completely mean to somebody that looks a bit more brown than them, and be extremely nice to somebody that looks whiter or speaks English. But at the same
mhm,
time, everything kind of flows a bit. They interact well in some moments. Now we're having a bit more frictions here. And the
mm,
moment I left, it was very interesting because I was completely an outsider until now. Not an outsider, but completely strange because there's really not Latinx communities
mhm,
in the areas I am. I suppose in London, that's where you have the most, or other bigger cities, but still, it's not America. It's
mhm.
another continent, so you have more, let's say, Spanish people. That's the people
Yeah.
that speak Spanish, right? So I'm very in that way, I'm lucky in that way. I'm very unique. And there's no, for example, there's a lot of struggle with Pakistani Indian because
Mhm.
of all the history they have, and there's big communities, but still there's some struggle. But I'm brown, but I don't belong to any group. So
Yeah.
they just see me brown and okay, that's I have no I have no more data where to put you. If I like you, if I don't like you, let's put you on a neutral zone and let's see what you have. So in that way, I'm very lucky. The other thing that was very interesting to me is when I started making my comics. I just wanted to explore Peru, like I told you, and and I just thought for a second, I'm not sure if they're going to like it or not, because many people might have no idea about Peru or might know that South America is there, but not that much than that. But I said, I don't know, let's try it because I feel very passionate about this idea. And I'm very curious about that because people in general, people that know about Peru or that have traveled about Peru, they really like it and they recognize some elements, even though it's science fiction, they really enjoy. Ah, yeah, 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 this is a city because my comics are named after or places or cities. So you might, it's like we're called, I don't know, Los Angeles or stuff like that. Great. I, I don't have your physical copy, but I have it on my tablet. Thank you. And and the thing is, and the people that don't know about it are very curious about it too. It's like I didn't because more and more you have more independent creators' voices, and it's more like, oh, I didn't know anything about this. Tell me more.
Yeah.
So there's a big group of that. How do you feel that, for example, Mañana and all these stories, a lot of Latinx are interested in these stories, but how many people that don't have any kind of roots to like us are getting more interested in our stories?
That's a great question. I have no idea. Uh, the only thing I can go off of is yeah, I don't know. Every now and then something that like represents us pops up and like I'm like, oh, that show isn't canceled yet. There must be more than just us watching it, right? uh, and and I feel like it's still sort of like outside interest in like our cultural stuff still kind of exists at a shallower level, where for some reason the example that's coming to mind right now for me is Jane the Virgin. Uh,
Okay.
where it's like there's all these references, like the whole thing is like a jokey reference to telenovela tropes, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And if you grew up watching telenovelas, there's like this thrill that you feel every time they make a reference, every time they use a trope, every time they whatever, and you're like, oh my god, right? um
Mhm.
but then I'm not sure like what like a white American who didn't grow up watching them, like what their experience is like if they watch and they're just like, oh my god, this show is so funny, or like uh,
Okay, okay, okay.
so to them it's just like, oh, that's funny. Like I like if they're like picking up like, and then also I worry like, okay, if they are looking at it and being like, okay, so this is like Latin American soap opera culture, right? And then walking away feeling like I know all about Latin America soap opera culture and feeling like they're educated now. So it's like,
Yes, 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 yes. You have some of that. That's for sure. And especially in USA, where you have, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of citizens that don't have the roots that read Latin America as, for example, I saw ages ago, I don't know, in one reality show or some, I don't know, some cooking show, and they were going to make a contest every episode. They needed to do some country, some food from some country, and make something interesting or creative, whatever. And they said, okay, because usually it was French cuisine, Italian cuisine, or something, and they said Latin American cuisine, and I was like, what's
yeah, what
that?
is that?
What's that? And that made tortillas, and I was like, that's like, no, that's a grain of sand. There's, I mean, they are great, but that's there's no way for me to simplify. It's like saying, I don't know, all men are the same or all women are the same or something like that. Didn't make any sense. So yeah, there's, I suppose there's that misreading of the thing.
Yeah, that I love that you used that the example is tortillas because in uh in Mexico, like a tortilla is like a corn or flour based like flat pita kind of thing. And then
Uh-huh.
in Cuba, a tortilla is an omelet. So even depends like, but like which tortilla are you talking
No, exactly. It's a
about?
it's a whole continent. I remember once they asked me, they were talking about that was in UK, I think, about our food, and they said, "So how do you make your tortillas?" And I was like, "We don't. We have other food. We don't even have them. When we want to eat tortillas, we go to a Mexican place, maybe. But no, it's that's very interesting sometimes when I manage to show my, for example, in my comics, I try to show a bit the culture with, it's like you already enter and you see the things and I'm not explaining so much. You're already kind of confused and you see the madness that might be happening. And I leave some space, like in many stories, because some things you cannot translate, and it's not
Yeah.
necessary. If not, you have to put a long word, and also the power disappears. The potency of that meaning, and many times when it's really not that important, I just leave words, I just leave things in Spanish or in some native language. And in my case, I was mentioning that yesterday on another panel. It was very interesting. I saw once from two readers, two really nice readers that I know from conventions. They were discussing one very particular word, Peruvian word that is huarique, that it's a word that has a lot of meaning and it's a long explanation. And they were discussing about how right they were about the meaning they found. And I was like, yes, yes. So that kind of thing also happens. You can express the culture if you get more particular than general. It's not like, okay, let me talk about whole South America. No, no, no. Let me tell you about
Yeah.
this particular place in a particular area in Peru, or a particular area in South America, in Cuba, or whatever. But the smaller you get, I guess you can get a bit more of empathy and curiosity than if you go for the bigger things that tend to be a bit more shallow, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, and yeah, with also specifically with Manana Anthology, actually with Manana Anthology and pretty much all the anthologies that Power and Magic Press puts out, I
Uh-huh.
usually lean toward like just letting the reader not know like what a certain cultural thing is. Like when it like I like it when it just kind of is in the story and it's like English, 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 super specific situation or reference to like the culture, English, English, English. And I'm like, I'm not translating that. Or even if we do translate, like if like it when the anthology is in English, I'm not translating that. And then when it's like when we translated Mañana into Spanish, there were situations where like if uh if something had to be in English because like like in the there's one story where a character dies and their consciousness reawakens in a virtual afterlife and they're on the trial period of it where they have to decide if they like the free trial of like having their consciousness live on or if they'd rather just die and go into oblivion and the the virtual world that their consciousness goes into for the afterlife is a version of their parents hometown uh
Uh-huh.
in their original country, but he grew up in the United States. uh,
Uh-huh.
so his Spanish is not that great, and he like knows a little bit, and sometimes and he like speaks English a little bit more. But then when he tries to speak Spanish to someone in the afterlife, he realizes that his American accent is gone, and that his Spanish is perfect now. So when he first tries to interact with someone and switches from English to Spanish, there's a part where he has to still be speaking English in the Spanish translation of the book
Of
for it to
course.
make sense. And even in that, I didn't like put a footnote for the Spanish readers like this is what he's saying in English. I'm not like, no, you have Google too. Everybody like learn. Everybody like get
Yeah, that's yeah,
become
it's
culturally like engaged. Though to be fair, I feel like that's less it feels like that's less of an issue or would be less of an issue for Latin American people because no matter where you are in the world, you're almost like pressured to know English or pressured to know a little English anyway. But
yeah.
then like in the US, like if you speak more than just English, you're like magic. They're like, wow, you speak two languages? How cultured of you. How special. Like, why would I learn two languages?
Yeah, in UK, it's also in the UK, it's also a bit like that. It's like, I suppose also people from USA might have this saying that we went to this place and nobody speaks English, and it's like, yeah, it's another country. It's they speak their language, right? And that happens the same there too. If you know more than one language, more than English, basically it's yeah, you kind of have a unicorn that flies or something like that. It's not that common. And some people know more languages, but still, it's that because it's such a broad language and it was part of the empire and all that, and it's so vast, but still people are, it's, and I, I'm I'm really happy that I know English. That's how my work had spread, and that's how I could move to the UK. But still, it's uh, it's more, it's richer in a way. You have more possibilities, so it's the same. Like I've been trying to make the effort to learn English. Even for me, it's more natural to speak Spanish. I totally good enough to make myself understand, to have any kind of conversation. But still, I'm making this effort. Make an
Mhm.
effort. Come on, it's just one page. It's just 7 words. Explore a bit, get a bit more curious, because my definitely my work expanded the moment I I started learning more and more English. That was one of the ways I had. There were some comics that I could manage to get some photocopies when I was a teenager, and I needed to improve my English to understand what they were saying. That's how my English started improving. I was studying, but yeah, it's a lot better when you connect a bit more the words about people that speak another language and to Spanish or to any. For example, in my comics, I also use other native languages. So it's that I make. I ask a translator to do them because I don't speak them at all. But I think that the sound of something also carries a lot of value, a lot of power. It's for example, when I watch a film that is not in Spanish or English, uh, I don't want to see it dubbed. I want to see the subtitles because the sound is very different. I can really hear your voice, not the voice of an actress doing an impersonation of you. That's not you. That's part of you. So that I need that. So that's why I try. There's one issue, I think the first one or the second one, when I put a whole excerpt and I just put as subtitles, small captions, the translation, but the main balloons are it's the language because that's how it looks, that's how it sounds, and that's how you tell a story, right? That's how this guy is speaking better Spanish, a more community Spanish when he's there. It's being a bit more truth about a certain area. You don't expect people going Cuba and everybody speaking English. That's not how it works.
Right. Exactly. The I was really fascinated when I was looking. I think it's in Puno, and the like first page had like the balloons in. I think it's called Aymara.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
Aymara.
I I'd never seen anyone do that before, and I was like, oh my god.
Really? Oh,
No, I'd seen people do that with like um I'd never seen anyone do that before with indigenous languages. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
I've seen it with like French or like, whatever, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah,
and
exactly.
and I had like this thrill about it so many so many indigenous languages have been wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh so it was almost this like really important moment of remembering like a bunch of them are still the primary language people speak every day. A
Yes.
bunch of them
Yeah,
are
that's
still,
that's that's their Spanish in that way.
yeah.
That's yeah, yeah, no, no, for me it was very important to put that. I couldn't just feel like wiping out something that really defines them. I don't know, I had to pay some respect to the culture because actually Aymara, the most population that speak in the Andes speak Quechua. Aymara is even a smaller group, but still I needed to put that in order to I don't know, to give them this value they have. And I actually plan to do more of that, but it was very important. I don't understand it, but because for example, many times you see, especially in films that I see subtitle, you see a film and somebody's usually speaking something like a main foreign language like Italian, French, or something like that, and they put French, they put Italian. But when you see something, let's say Pakistani or Iran or something like that, they put foreign, which is like, come on, come on, that's a language. Put the language. So that kind of thing. It's like if you're a big country, I don't care. That's great that they put the language, but the same. I want to pay the same respect to this small community that gives them value, and that's basically those are our grandfathers. So yeah, that was very important to me. Really, really happy you liked it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Uh yeah, and so much of the heart of like mañana relates to that as well, like sort of like having the audacity to say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 500 years from now, not only do we still exist, not
Uh-huh.
only is all of our Latinx shit gonna keep going on? Like this isn't going anywhere. But it also it also it even like created room for situations where like, oh, 500 years from now, Central America is the hub of the world. It's the global power, right? Like just
Yeah.
throw that out there. And I'm like, I don't know how we got there, but yeah, it's good to be reminded that like power shifts and like languages shift and like things
Yes.
persist and things die and like it like everything transforms, nothing's set in stone. There's one story that's by a Peruvian creator as well. He
Alberto Rayo.
Yeah, Beto. I love
Yeah.
his stories
Yeah, I know him.
so
I know him.
yeah.
He's great. He's really good.
Yeah, he's so good. And just
Yeah.
like taking and I like just like moving beyond like I'm gonna talk shit a little bit because there's a pet peeve of mine in the Latinx comics world. Uh Comics about the Aztecs or
Uh-huh.
whatever. Like when the comic is just like, oh, it's about our real Mexican culture, and then it takes place pre-Columbian, and the Aztecs are running around, and they're all like 6'3" and like really buff and light skinned, and they're like, we were warriors, and I'm like, yeah, but you seem to be like romanticizing like this idea, like the concept of being native, the flavor of being Aztec. And I'm like, first of all, being Aztec, that the Aztecs were an empire. Like lots of people were Aztec. Like who are you talking about? Like
Yeah.
there's so many other native peoples in Mexico. Um, but like what bothers me about it the most is that it's like, oh yeah, we're all descended from Aztecs, and I'm like, we talk a lot about descent, but like the Mixteca are still there. They're
Yeah.
not they're not our grandfathers. They're our neighbors. Like they're your neighbors. They're right there. And like it's so seeing so also with like with a Bento story and with your work, you both sort of took like, all right, indigenous peoples, indigenous ideas, and there's all this tech everywhere. We're like, it's the future, all this stuff is going on, and like, yeah, they're still there. And yeah, their culture is still important. It's still affecting things. Like, what do you mean? That's not that doesn't belong to the past. Like there's specific incidents that occurred,
Yes.
certain important incidents that happened to those people in the past, but they're more than like the historical context for your own Latinx mixed sense of self. They're a community that lives now.
Yeah.
Like
Uh,
they matter.
they matter a lot, and I think you also touch a point that it's very important to me. It's you want to tell your story as truthful as you can, and to be honest about a story. It's like talking about your family, right? Your family, I'm pretty sure, has really great deeds, but not so great deeds, like me or you. That's normal. That's what makes you human. So if I start telling a story about any kind of group, they not perfect. They make mistakes. Sometimes it gets messy, and that's how it's interesting. You don't have black and white. You have a lot of different shades of gray, and that's the thing. And also, I think that's how Alberto treats his work. It's he explores different things, and not everybody is because we're native or we're Latin Americans. We are great and bright citizens of the world. No, some are good, some are the worst. So, and you just play around with all these characters. If you romanticize things, you just make a pamphlet, and that's tends to be boring. Actually, it's like I don't know. I'm not interested in reading something like that. I'm interested in reading stories that lead me somewhere where I hear an honest voice telling me something that I feel passionate about.
Yeah,
Which I think your mañana is great. I haven't finished the whole book, but I've read some great stories. I managed to read Alberto's story, and yeah, it's really cool. And I see a lot of the also the language you've used. There's a lot of Spanish, and it's like, yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, yeah, I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I've read Manu so far. I got both Manu and Buno through your Kickstarter, I
Thank
believe.
you.
Uh, for I don't know if you can see it, but for the occasion, I have up the Kickstarter prints right here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's Helena. Ah, I'm going to destroy her name. Well, Helena, and the other is Cleonique Hilsaka, which it's their fantastic works. Fantastic works. For example,
Oh yeah,
that was really nice. For example, those are designs of mine, and I told them, do whatever you want to do, just do your stuff. And the result was I couldn't be happier with the results.
yeah, I love them. The hmm. Speaking of the future, that actually, I'm gonna leave that on a cliffhanger. I'm gonna leave that on a cliffhanger to make people like really really want to buy our stuff, to be like, I need to get in their heads. I need to like know where this was going, because right as I started talking, I realized we are at time.
Yeah, yeah, we're on the time. Yeah, yeah.
but uh but yeah, this was really good. I
It
really
was
enjoyed
fun.
this
It was
conversation,
fun.
and it was really
Yeah,
good
yeah,
to meet you.
yeah. Same here. Same here. I was very, very happy when I heard your name was going to be here.
Yeah, I at first I was like, wait, who is that? Have I heard of them? And then I saw the portfolio and I was like, I have those comics. I like this.
That's great. That's great. No, no, I remember your name because you were the one really making all the promotion. I met Mañana because of Alberto, but I think it's a very, very interesting piece of work. I hope there's more Mañanas coming, and more really good stuff about Latin American science fiction.
Yeah, I'm gonna cram Latinx comics into America's throat, whether they like it or
Yes, yes, that's great. That's great.
not. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amit. It's been a total pleasure. Have a nice
Yeah.
day.
You too. Bye.